Hey, Read 511, this is Dr. Keisler, and I wanted to spend a few minutes giving you some feedback on some of the work that you've done in the past 2 weeks and talk a little bit about some upcoming work that you're going to be getting done. So, of course, if any of you take me for more than one class this semester, you know that I'm totally digging this fall PowerPoint right now. So you're probably like, oh man, I've seen it again. I've been using it in 508 and using it in 516, but I'm in a fall kind of mood. Maybe it's because the weather's actually cool right now. So anyway, I digress. So I wanted to talk about your article summaries. So I've been going through those over the past few days, and you should all have a score for them in the gradebook by now. They, by and large, were really excellent. So I'm really impressed with the quality of the summaries that you're putting up there. What I thought is really neat is that the majority of you didn't just kind of give me this, explanation of the article, but you really focused on the research. So you didn't just kind of give me a very vague what the article is about, but you really honed in on what the study was, what the question is that they were looking into, and many of you even put some description of how they did the study, how they collected their research. So I thought that was really nice, because what that information that gives to me too is kind of how good of a study is it. And I'm also impressed with the fact that you're using really reputable journals for your search. Maybe it's because the big search engine ERIC was down for so many weeks and it forced you to go into the other ones, because ERIC can sometimes be a little bit difficult to navigate because everything goes into there. But maybe because you were forced to use JSTOR or ASP, who knows if that influenced it at all. But you're pulling up really great articles. And so what I've noticed is that as I look through and I see what your questions are, the articles that you're choosing are really relevant. And like I said, they are from really good peer-reviewed journals by and large. And I was also pleased to see that many of you are identifying articles from some of the big names in each of your topics. So, as I look at what your question is, I was able to say, oh, look at that. They have an article from Gambrell. Look at that. They have an article from Guthrie, which is what I, expect to see. So you're doing a really good job of selecting the pieces, and that's a real testament to the amount of time you're putting into your research and honing your skills in terms of being able to identify quality articles. And what I also saw was several of you are refining your questions, which is absolutely acceptable, and you don't need to necessarily email me separately, which some of you are doing, to tell me that you're refining your questions. It's okay if you just make note of it in your post, or you just write me a short blurb in your post, because then I'll see it, and I can kind of see what it does for me is I can see why you're refining it as I see kind of the articles you selected. I can see how your question is changing a little bit, and that's fine, because that's what happens. Sometimes it even happens towards the end of the study, when you start to look at your results, and you've gone out there and you did your literature review, and you go out and you do your research, and you start to look at your results, you go, oh my goodness, look at this. Stuff came up that we didn't even anticipate, and so you kind of go back, and you don't change your research questions, obviously, because you've already done the study. But when you write it up, what you do in your discussion and your findings section is you mention the idea that, look at that, we didn't go out to study teacher beliefs, but we found out that the teacher beliefs were a huge part of XYZ. That's happening actually in the study that I'm working on right now. Is we ended up writing a huge portion of our discussion and finding section on teacher beliefs, and we didn't have any questions that related to that, but we really found that we couldn't get around it because it was popping up all over the place in our findings. So in terms of the article summaries, you're doing a really excellent job there. So I also wanted to talk a little bit about the historical analysis project. So I've had several questions about the article analysis template, so I wanted to go over that a little bit. So let me go in. I did, where are we? So I did post it on our site. This is our Titanium site. That's what it looks like on my end. So I put it right here under assignments, and it's also on the historical ERA's wiki that you've been working on. It's on that page that has all of the articles that you needed to read on there. So these are the questions that came up about the template. Oh, great. It's going to be stuck under here. Give me 1 second. Okay, I found it. It was kind of stuck under my button there, my record button. So what had come up was that there was actually, on the rubric part here, underneath the grading criteria, it had said 2 at 8% for a total of 16%. And so that is my fault. We used to, that was old. So we used to do 2 of these because the classes used to be a lot smaller. And so each student was assigned to cover 2 eras. So you were reading an article from one era and an article from another era because we had the 6 eras. So each person was, working on Group A and Group D, or Group A and Group E. So since we have enough students, you are only required to do 1 wiki project now for 1 era, and so then you only need to do 1 template for 1 article from your era. So it is no longer 2. So if that was causing you any confusion, I apologize. I didn't even notice when I reposted this from a previous semester. So in terms of what this is and when it is due, and I mentioned this last week, it is due when your project is due. So if you're part of Group D, you're turning it in when Group D turns in their completed wiki project. This can be dropped into the Dropbox. I also know that when I I forgot to disable the due date when I put the Dropbox up, and so some people were concerned that it was due last week. It is not. That was just the default. And it doesn't show it on mine, which is kind of confusing, but it shows it on yours. It doesn't show it on the instructor site when it has that default due date. So it is due when your project is due. And then in terms of kind of what I'm looking for, you're pulling out the research questions. So those articles, except for there are 2, and if you're reading that article, you know who it is. They're more reviews of the literature or directions for the literature to go in, and I've already talked with those folks. But all of them have some research questions in them. So I want to know, what was this study looking at? And then in terms of category of research method, so was it qualitative? Was it quantitative? Was it experimental, quasi-experimental, a mixed methods study? And then underneath those, you can describe what they did. Is it a case study? Is it an ethnography? Was it a longitudinal study? So what was it? And that should be, you should be able to find that in the methodology section. So where would you classify, or how would you classify the research done in this article for that study? And then I would like to know how they collected their data. So obviously these should match, right? So if you're saying that it was a qualitative study and it was a case study, then I would expect that the data collection dealt with observations and interviews and had something to do with, time spent, student work evaluated. There should be coding. There should be, observation protocols, interview protocols, those types of things. So a description of, how they collected the data and then the results. So in terms of your evaluation of the validity of the results, generally, the older your article, the more you have to write here. So what you want to do in this piece here is for the evaluation of the validity and your evaluation of the conclusions drawn, but particularly for the validity, is go back into your text and look at how you categorize the research and reread the description of what the characteristics of that research are, and then that's going to give you an idea of whether or not you think the results were valid and reliable, right? So considering that our text book is current and some of these studies are really old, you may have a lot to write about. So you may say that we no longer would collect samples that way, or folks this was the beginning of qualitative research when this study was done, and so there have been great improvements to the methodology since then. So I think that the results may not be particularly valid because of X, Y, and Z. and then kind of your evaluation of the conclusions drawn is that space that exists here between what you thought about the validity of the results, and then kind of where they went with it in their discussion section. So when they talked about what they thought those results meant, this is your evaluation of whether or not you think their results are valid, reliable, and generalizable. So if the study was conducted again, do you think that they would get the same results? And so some of these articles, it's quite apparent that things have changed, and some it's not, and that's okay, because you can talk about that they would stand up, and why you feel that the results of the study were indeed valid and reliable, and as were their conclusions. So then the implications, again, then you talk about, so what's the importance of this study, right? So have as the result of this study and studies like it, were there things that were put into practice? Again, this is going to be influenced and affected by kind of which era your article falls into. And you can talk about, do you think it still has implications, or if it's a more current article, what have you seen in terms of this research and research like it, how has it pushed the field of reading in a different direction or new direction, or continue the direction. So this is a good part as well. In general, these templates completed are no more than, I'd say, about a page and a half. So don't think that this needs to be like a 2, 3, 4 page summary at all. So generally people fit this into 1 to kind of 1.5 pages when the template moves down the page as they start to fill stuff in. All right, so I hope that was clear up some of those questions for you. And then I just wanted to also spend, let's see, what else did I want? Okay, yeah, the wiki. Let me just make sure I wrote, those were my notes to myself. So the wiki, I looked so far over Group A's, what they turned in, and it's great. And so I think it's a real, this is a real testament, I think, to the quality of work that this particular group has continued to turn in. I don't know if Dr. Brandon shared this with you, but I know many of you have 516 with her, and then those of you who don't have 516 with her have 516 with me. But she had sent around some samples of things that you guys have been writing in your in your WAPRs, right? Your assessment templates based on your work with your student in 516, and just she is really excited about the quality of work that you guys have turned in as compared to the work that has been turned in previous semesters. And so I can agree with her there that I think that this wiki project is another example of that. So you guys have really, this group or this cohort has really raised the bar, I think, in terms of expectations for what our master's students online can turn in. And so just kind of clicking through and looking at some of the links that were put in Group A's project and the way that you guys grouped and categorized things, this is a really great way for us to start. And like I said, it's really really high quality work, particularly compared to what we have seen in past semesters. So I think what I want to say is thank you, and continue to really raise the bar for us in this program, and continue to do the good work that you've been doing. So I look forward, to seeing everybody else's projects. I hope that you enjoyed looking at Group A's. We don't have one this week because when we talk about Group B, it's talked about over 2 weeks. So you'll see that your course calendar is it's a little bit screwy, but in terms of what I put as the topics, but the readings and everything are all the same, but I did not double the topic. So Group B, your era spans 2 weeks, and so we talk about it this week, and we start to talk about it this week, and then next week we talk about it again, and so we actually see Group B's wiki next week. So, all right, I'm almost out of time on this screencast, and I don't really think I have any cause to go into a second. So, like I said, keep up the good work. If you have questions about your literature review, of course, feel free to email me. You don't need to email me if you're revising your question again, but yeah, if you haven't heard any specific feedback from me via message or an email, then you can be assured that what you turned in so far for your article reviews and all of that has been just fine. So I will talk to you guys next week.